She came to Connemara for one thing, peace. A quiet Christmas far away from the noise, the expectations, and the people who kept breaking her heart. But on her very first night, something felt wrong. It started with a letter slipped under her door, no name, no greeting, just 7 chilling words, "You can't escape what you left behind." At first, she thought it was a mistake. But then the lights in her cottage flickered. I came to Connemara because I needed peace. Not the kind people talk about casually, not the, "I need a break from work" kind. I needed the peace that comes after you've spent too long pretending you're fine. The peace you look for when something inside you finally says, enough. I had spent the entire year feeling like I was walking with a weight tied to my chest. Too many arguments. Too many broken promises. Too many nights crying without letting anyone hear. So when December came, when the world started getting loud with celebrations and cheerful music and crowded rooms, something in me broke a little more. I didn't want anything loud. I didn't want decorations or parties or people trying to convince me Christmas was a magical cure to everything. I wanted quiet. I wanted space. I wanted to feel like myself again. That's how I ended up in a small coastal cottage in Connemara, a place where the wind sings louder than the people, where the ocean talks to the cliffs, and where winter feels like a soft blanket instead of a cold punishment. I still remember the moment I arrived. The taxi door closed behind me, and the driver gave me a polite nod before driving away. His headlights disappeared down the narrow road, leaving me alone with the sound of distant waves. The sky was already turning dark, even though it wasn't that late. Irish winters can be like that, long nights, short days, and a kind of twilight that lingers like a secret. I stood there for a moment, my suitcase beside me, my breath fogging in the cold air. The cottage looked exactly like the photos, small stone walls, a slanted roof, a wooden door painted a faded blue, and smoke curling gently from the chimney. For a second, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Real, honest relief. The quiet wrapped around me like warm hands. No shouting. No tension. No constant buzzing of my phone. Just silence. I walked to the door, turned the old iron key the owner had mailed me, and stepped inside. The cottage was warm. Not too warm, just a soft, gentle heat that made my shoulders drop. There was a fireplace on the far wall, a small kitchen to the left, and a cozy sitting room to the right. Everything smelled faintly of pine and something sweet, maybe cinnamon or old wood. It felt lived in, but not crowded. It felt safe. I put my bag down and walked through the space, touching the wooden table, running my hand along the back of the sofa, testing the creak of the floorboards. It didn't feel like a vacation house. It felt like someone had poured quiet into the walls and let it settle. For the first time in a long time, I believed I had chosen the right place. I made myself a cup of tea, sat near the fireplace, and listened to the crackling of the wood. I thought maybe this was how healing starts, not with big revelations or sudden joy, but with silence and warmth and the feeling of being somewhere no one knows your past. I planned to stay 5 days. 5 days of nothing. No commitments, no messages, no explanations. Just peace. But peace, I learned, has its own rules. Sometimes it arrives gently. Sometimes it tests you first. And sometimes, it comes only after the truth has been dragged out of the dark. I didn't know any of that yet. I was still in the soft stage, the hopeful stage, the maybe this Christmas will be different stage. That lasted until the evening. The sun had fully set. The wind had picked up, brushing against the windows and whistling faintly through the gaps in the old wooden frames. The fireplace light danced on the walls, creating long shadows that swayed gently as if alive. I wasn't scared. Old houses make old sounds. That's what I told myself. I was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through the small welcome folder the cottage owner had left, instructions for heating, the Wi-Fi code, emergency numbers, and a short handwritten note. If you need anything, Miss Gallagher next door can help. She's lived here her whole life. Very kind woman. I smiled when I read it. There was something comforting about knowing someone nearby knew I existed. But then, I heard the sound. A soft shuffle. Not from inside the cottage. From outside. Right near the door. Not the wind. Not an animal. A step. A slow, deliberate step. My heart stopped for a moment. I stayed perfectly still, listening. Another sound. Not quite a knock. But a gentle tap. Like something had been pushed under the door. I stood up slowly, walked toward the front of the cottage, and stared at the floor. There was an envelope. Plain white. No name on it. Just lying there, half inside the cottage, half outside. I felt a small, cold knot twist in my stomach. I picked it up. It was light. Thin. Like it only had one piece of paper inside. I tore the top gently, slid out the paper, and unfolded it. There were only 7 words. No greeting. No punctuation. Just, you can't escape what you left behind. My breath went shallow. I read it again, hoping it said something else. It didn't. I suddenly felt every sound more sharply, the wind, the fire, my own heartbeat. My hands went cold. Who knew I was here? Only the rental company. And I hadn't told anyone else. Not my friends. Not my family. Not even the person I had spent most of the year arguing with. Nobody. So who would leave me a message like this? I swallowed hard and stepped outside, pulling the door open with a shaky hand. The road was empty. No footprints in the dirt besides the ones from earlier. No shadows except the ones made by the porch light. No sign anyone had been there. But someone had. Someone close enough to slide a letter under my door without being seen. I stepped back into the cottage and locked the door. Then I locked the small latch on top. And then the bottom one, too. I held the letter for a long time. I knew it wasn't a prank. It was too specific. Too intentional. Too connected to the reason I had run from home in the first place. But I told myself I wouldn't jump to conclusions. I was tired. Travel makes the mind dramatic. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the letter wasn't meant for me. Maybe. I put it on the table and tried to return to the couch, to the warmth, to the comfort I felt earlier. But the peace was gone. Something else had settled in its place, something quiet but sharp. A warning. A beginning. I didn't know it yet. But Connemara had its own way of revealing things. And the message on that paper. It wasn't random. It was the first sign of a Christmas truth I had been avoiding for a long, long time. I barely slept that night. Even though the cottage was warm, even though the wind softened after midnight, I kept waking up to check the door, the windows, the shadows on the wall. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the letter again. Those 7 words replayed in my head like a whisper I couldn't turn off. You can't escape what you left behind. At one point, around 3 in the morning, I sat on the edge of the bed with the blanket around my shoulders. I stared at the dark window, listening to the quiet hum of the night. No footsteps. No more tapping. No more surprises. But the silence didn't comfort me anymore. It felt like the whole place was holding its breath. By sunrise, I had made myself 2 promises: would not panic. I would not leave. I came here for peace. I wouldn't run away on the first night. So when the sky finally turned a soft shade of gray and the first hints of morning crept across the hills, I forced myself up. I showered. I made tea. I opened the curtains. And I told myself that the day would be normal. Or at least more normal than last night. The cottage looked different in the daylight. Less mysterious. More charming. The ocean was visible now, a long, dark stretch with white foam crashing against the rocks. The fields behind the cottage shimmered with frost. For a moment, I could almost pretend the letter didn't happen. Almost. Around 10, I decided to take a walk. The owner had mentioned a small grocery shop about a 15-minute walk down the lane. Fresh air, a distraction, movement, all of it felt necessary. I grabbed my coat, wrapped a scarf around my neck, and stepped outside. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and clean. Irish winter air has a way of waking you up even if you're exhausted. As I walked down the narrow path, I noticed something strange. There were footprints in the frost. Not mine. Adult footprints. Coming from the direction of the road. Leading straight to my cottage door. I froze. They were faint, half melted by the morning sun. But they were real. Someone really had come last night. Someone had walked right up to my home in the dark. And there was no return trail. The prints only went one way. Meaning whoever left them had walked away before the frost formed. Meaning they had been there earlier than I thought. Meaning they didn't want to be followed. My heart tightened, but I forced myself to keep moving. The last thing I wanted was to stand in the middle of the path looking scared. The shop wasn't far. Just a small building with a green door and a single window decorated with Christmas lights. A bell chimed softly when I stepped inside. It smelled like fresh bread. Like home. An older woman behind the counter looked up from stacking tins. "Morning, love," she said, her voice warm. "You're staying in Sean's cottage up the hill, aren't you?" I nodded. Her knowing didn't surprise me. Places like this, small towns where people leave their doors unlocked, everyone knows everything. She smiled kindly. "He said a young woman was coming for the holidays. Brave choice, spending Christmas all alone." I tried to return her smile. "I just needed some quiet." "Ah," she said softly, as if she understood that in a deeper way. "Quiet can be good. Sometimes it's the only thing that helps." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the letter was still burning in the back of my mind. I wandered the aisles, picking up bread, butter, tea, and a few snacks. When I brought everything to the counter, the woman gave me another gentle look. "If you need anything, anything at all," she said, "you can knock on my door. And Miss Gallagher's, too. We're neighbors here, even if some houses are a bit far apart." Miss Gallagher. The woman mentioned in the welcome note. I hesitated before asking, "Does Miss Gallagher, does she know the area well?" "Oh, very well," the shopkeeper said. "She's lived here all her life. Keeps to herself mostly, but she's a good woman. Lost her husband years ago. Think she likes the quiet, same as you." I opened my mouth to ask more, actually, to ask the real question I was carrying, but I chickened out. I didn't want to sound suspicious. Or paranoid. Or like someone running from something. Even though, that's exactly what I was. Instead, I paid for my things, thanked her, and walked back. The wind had picked up a little. My scarf kept blowing against my face. The frost was fully melted now, and the footprints from earlier were gone. But I remembered exactly what they looked like. When I reached the cottage, I stopped outside for a moment, listening. Nothing. Only the wind. I stepped inside, put the groceries away, and made myself tea. I pretended I was settling back in. Pretending to be calm. Pretending things were fine. But pretending only works until reality knocks again. This time, it didn't knock. It whispered. I was sitting on the couch, drinking tea, looking at the fireplace, when I heard it, a soft voice. Distant. Barely there. At first, I thought it was the wind. But no, it was too rhythmic. Too human. I held my breath. The voice came again. A woman's voice. Muffled. Not angry. Not loud. But saying something I couldn't make out. I stood up slowly and followed the sound, my fingers trembling around the teacup. It was coming from outside. From the direction of the neighbor's cottage. Miss Gallagher. I set my cup down and walked toward the window, but the angle didn't show her house clearly. Just a bit of roof and chimney. The voice stopped. Silence again. And then, a knock. Not at my door. At my window. 3 soft taps, quick and nervous. My heart jumped into my throat. I turned toward the sound, but I couldn't see who it was through the curtain. For a full 2 seconds, I froze. Then, slowly, carefully, I pulled the curtain back. And there she was. A woman in her late 60s, wrapped in a wool coat and a thick scarf. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, and her gray hair was tied back neatly. She looked exactly how a harmless neighbor should look. But her eyes. Her eyes were serious. Sharp. Alert. She motioned for me to open the window. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I unlocked it and opened it just enough to hear her. "Are you all right, dear?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. I'm fine." "Why?" Her eyes softened. "You don't look fine." I didn't know what to say. She glanced toward the road, then back at me. "Did you, by any chance, receive a letter last night?" My stomach twisted. I didn't answer. But my silence was enough. She took a slow breath and nodded. "I thought so," she said. "It starts like that." My voice was barely a whisper. "What starts?" She looked straight into my eyes, and something in her expression made my skin go cold. "Karma, dear," she said softly. "Christmas karma. It comes for the ones who try to hide from the truth." For a moment, I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Her words sat between us like cold air. Christmas karma. I didn't know whether it was superstition, local folklore, or something else entirely. But the way she said it. It felt like she wasn't speaking metaphorically. Miss Gallagher kept her voice low, almost too soft to hear over the wind. "May I come in for a moment?" she asked. I hesitated. Every part of me felt tense, cautious. I didn't know this woman. I didn't know anyone here. And a stranger asking to come inside right after mentioning a mysterious letter felt too much. But her eyes weren't threatening. They were worried. Concerned in the way older women get when something reminds them of a wound they've seen before. I nodded softly. She walked around to the door, and I opened it for her. Inside, she removed her scarf and gloves, brushing off a bit of snow that had started to fall. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she said as she stepped inside. "You looked shaken. I didn't want to leave you alone with that." I swallowed. "What do you mean?" "That?" She motioned to the table where the letter still lay. Her expression tightened. "Did anyone see you arrive yesterday?" she asked. "No," I said. "Only the taxi driver. And the owner, through email." She nodded as if that confirmed something she already suspected. Then she walked closer to the table and gently touched the corner of the paper, not picking it up, just acknowledging it. "People come to Connemara for many reasons," she said quietly. "Peace, healing, escaping." She looked at me then. "Which one are you here for?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know. but because suddenly it felt too revealing to say out loud. Her gaze softened again. I'm not here to judge you, dear. God knows we all have reasons to run sometimes. She sat on the couch, neatly folding her hands in her lap. You should know something about this place, she continued. Connemara is quiet. Beautiful. Gentle. But it has a way of illuminating things. Things people hide from themselves. And around Christmas, that truth becomes louder. Her tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper. Fear? No, not fear. Experience. I sat across from her, feeling oddly like a child receiving advice I wasn't ready for. Who left the letter? I asked. She exhaled slowly. We don't know. Not exactly. It's happened before. Over the years, always around Christmas. Always for someone who arrives with a heavy heart. I felt the muscles in my shoulders tighten. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Not even, I cut myself off. But she noticed. Not even the person you left behind, she said gently. My breath caught. I hadn't told her anything. Not a single detail. But she said it so naturally, as if she already understood the pattern. How do you know that? I whispered. She looked into the fire, her expression thoughtful. Because this place draws people who are carrying something unfinished, she said. Hurt. Guilt. Broken trust. Shadows of things not yet spoken. My throat tightened. She wasn't wrong. But the accuracy of her words scared me. It's not magic, she added quickly, as if she sensed my hesitation. It's simply awareness. Small villages see what big cities overlook. She reached out slightly, as if offering reassurance. When someone arrives alone, right before Christmas, with eyes that look like they've cried too much, we can tell. I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. Instead, I whispered, what does the letter mean? Why me? She paused, considering. Because, dear, she said, leaning forward just a little, someone here knows your heart is unsettled. They know you're carrying something unresolved. And they think, rightly or wrongly, you need to face it. My nails pressed into my palms. Face what? Her answer was soft. Whatever you came here to avoid. I looked away, my chest tight. Suddenly the fire seemed too bright, too loud, too close. After a moment, she continued. The letters stopped for a while. Years, actually. But whenever someone arrives with a burden they refuse to name, the pattern returns. She nodded toward the table. That is not a threat. It's a push. Her voice lowered again. And it won't be the last. A cold sensation slid down my spine. You mean there will be more? Yes, she said simply. As long as you keep trying to silence whatever truth you left behind. I shook my head slightly. I didn't come here to think about any of that. I came to get away. To rest. I know, she said. But rest only comes after honesty. Not before. Her words felt heavy. Uncomfortably true. But I still didn't understand. Do you know who writes them? I asked again. She hesitated. No, she said. But some people believe it's the same person every year. Someone old. Someone who watches. Someone who thinks they're delivering justice. I felt the air shift around me. Justice? I repeated quietly. She nodded. Karma, dear. Christmas karma. That's what some call it. I let that settle. Christmas karma. A strange phrase. A strange idea. But when I thought about my past year, when I thought about everything I had pushed aside, Everything I refused to confront. The idea didn't feel entirely wrong. She stood from the couch slowly, her bones creaking softly. I shouldn't stay long, she said. You need space to think. She walked to the door, wrapping her scarf around her neck again. Before leaving, she looked at me with that same steady gaze. If you hear anything tonight, don't ignore it. The truth comes quietly before it comes loud. A shiver passed through me, and I wasn't sure if it was the draft or her words. She stepped outside, and the cold rushed in briefly before I closed the door. Silence filled the cottage again. Deep, heavy, thoughtful silence. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, replaying everything she said. Her voice, her warning, her certainty. Then I walked back to the table and picked up the letter. The paper felt colder now. Sharper. I read the sentence again. You can't escape what you left behind. But this time, another thought followed it. What exactly had I left behind? Was it only my pain? My exhaustion? Or was it something deeper, something I hadn't admitted even to myself? I sat down slowly. I thought of the fights. The words I wished I never said. The silence that grew between two people who once felt inseparable. The moment I walked away instead of talking. The night I closed the door and turned my phone off, without knowing that he would try calling for the next 4 hours. I hadn't processed any of it. I hadn't even allowed myself to. And now, here I was. Halfway across the country. Trying to hide from something that apparently followed me anyway. Miss Gallagher's voice echoed in my mind, it starts like that. I put the letter back down. The cottage no longer felt peaceful. Not in the way I hoped. It felt like a place waiting for the next revelation. And I didn't have to wait long. Because that night, just after midnight, when the fire had burned low, and the world was quiet enough to hear even the smallest sound, I heard it again. A step. A slow, deliberate step outside my door. And then, something slid underneath it. Another envelope. I didn't get up immediately. For a few seconds, I just sat there on the couch, frozen. My heart was beating too fast, too loud. The room felt small. The shadows felt longer. Even the ticking of the old clock on the wall felt like it was echoing inside my chest. Another envelope. I stared at the space near the front door where it lay, a thin white shape against the wooden floor. My breath came out uneven. Miss Gallagher's words repeated in my mind, it won't be the last. She was right. Someone had come again. Someone had stood right outside my door in the dark, while I was awake, while I was only a few feet away. And I hadn't heard them until the envelope slid across the floor. I forced myself to stand. My knees felt weak. My fingers were shaking. When I reached the letter, I didn't pick it up immediately. I just looked at it, afraid of what the next message might say. The first letter was a warning. A reminder. A push. What would the second be? I finally bent down and lifted it. It was light. Too light. As if the paper inside didn't weigh anything at all. I took a deep breath, walked to the table, and sat down. The cottage felt colder. Even though the fire was still burning, the whole atmosphere felt different now, like the walls were listening. I opened the envelope with slow, careful fingers. There was one small piece of paper again. One sentence again. One single line that hit me the moment I read it. Running brings more pain than truth ever will. I felt something deep inside me tighten. Almost break. The words were simple. But they cut right through the quiet I had tried to build. I placed the paper on the table next to the first letter. Side by side, they looked like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to assemble. Last night, you can't escape what you left behind. Tonight, running brings more pain than truth ever will. My throat felt dry. My eyes burned a little. Whoever wrote these knew something. Something about me. Something about why I came here. Something I hadn't told a single soul. I closed my eyes for a moment. Was it possible that my mind was creating connections that weren't real? Was I being paranoid? Was it just coincidence? No. The words were too specific. Too personal. And whoever wrote them had been close enough to my door to hear my movements. The timing was too perfect. They slid the note only when the fire had burned low, only when the room was quiet, only when I was alone again. Someone was watching. Not constantly. Not maliciously. But intentionally. I pulled the blanket around my shoulders and went to the window. I didn't open it. I only looked outside. Nothing. Just darkness. Soft falling snow. The faint shape of trees swaying in the wind. I checked the road. Empty. Checked the path. Empty. But the silence was too thick. I stood there for a long moment, then slowly walked back to the couch. I didn't want to wake Miss Gallagher. I didn't want to call the owner and sound dramatic. I didn't want to run. But something inside me felt unsettled. Like the past was creeping closer. I lay down on the couch instead of going to the bedroom. I kept the fire alive. I kept the lights low. And I kept the 2 letters in sight. I didn't sleep much. Every small sound made my eyes snap open. The wind. A branch. The soft shift of the cottage settling. Nothing else happened that night. No footsteps. No whispering voices. No shadows moving in the dark. Just silence. Tense silence. Morning came gray and cold. I sat at the table with both letters in front of me, drinking tea I couldn't taste. I had a choice: pretend this wasn't happening, or talk to someone. There was only one person I trusted even a little. Miss Gallagher. I put on my coat, shoved the 2 letters into my pocket, and stepped outside. The snow was thin and crunchy under my boots. The air smelled clean, sharp, wintry. Her cottage was only a short walk away, a small, old house with ivy along the stone walls and a chimney releasing a thin stream of smoke. When I knocked, she opened the door almost immediately, as if she was already expecting me. Her expression was calm. But her eyes flicked immediately to my face, reading something there. "You got another one," she said softly. I nodded. "Come inside," she said. Her cottage was different from mine, older, filled with books and old photos, small warm lamps instead of bright lighting. A gentle scent of lavender floated in the air. She gestured for me to sit at the kitchen table. I took out the 2 letters and laid them in front of her. Her expression darkened just slightly. She read them slowly. Silently. Her fingers tracing the edges of each page. "Same handwriting," she murmured. "Same tone." My voice came out tight. "Who writes these?" She shook her head. "I've never seen the person." "No one has. But people talk. People remember things." I leaned forward. "What things?" Miss Gallagher looked out the window for a moment before answering. "There was a girl, about 10 years ago," she said quietly. "She came here after breaking off a relationship. A very painful one. She was running from guilt she never spoke about." I felt my stomach twist. "She started getting letters, just like you. One a night. Each one pushing her to talk about what she tried to bury." "What happened to her?" I whispered. "She left on the 3rd night," Miss Gallagher said. "Went back home. Faced the man she'd hurt. They talked. She cried. They didn't get back together, but she healed. Truly healed. I swallowed. And the letters? They stopped the moment she left. My chest tightened. So this person, they help people? They force people, she corrected gently. They believe truth is a gift. Even when it hurts. Even when it feels intrusive. I rubbed my forehead, feeling the weight of everything pressing down. And if I don't face it? I asked quietly. Miss Gallagher's gaze softened with something like sadness. Then the letters will continue, she said. Not forever. Just until something inside you breaks open. I sat back slowly. My heart felt heavy. My eyes felt hot. She placed a gentle hand on my arm. Dear, what are you running from? I looked down at the table. I didn't want to say it. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because saying it would make it real. She waited quietly. Patiently. And something inside me cracked a little. I whispered, barely audible, him. Her expression didn't change. What happened? She asked gently. But I pushed back. I can't talk about it. Not yet, she said softly. But you will. I closed my eyes. A tear slipped out without permission. She squeezed my arm lightly. I will tell you one thing, she said. No matter who writes the letters, no matter how unsettling they are never meant to harm. My voice trembled. They feel like they are. No, she said firmly but kindly. They feel like fear. Because the truth scares the ones who run from it. I wiped my face. What do I do now? She looked at me with a mixture of certainty and worry. You wait, she said. And you listen. I frowned. Listen to what? To whatever comes next. When I left her cottage, the sky was turning darker again. Clouds gathering. Snow threatening. I walked back slowly, thinking about everything she said. Everything I refused to say. When I reached my cottage, something stopped me cold. There was something hanging on my door. A small object. I walked closer, my heart pounding. It was a Polaroid photograph, pinned to the wood with a single thumbtack. A photograph of the ocean cliffs. Taken recently. Taken from behind someone. Someone standing at the edge of the cliff. Someone wearing my coat. Someone who looked like me. But I had never been there. My hands shook. On the bottom of the photo, in the same handwriting as the letters, were 4 words, face it before it breaks. And just like that, the real story began. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I stood there in front of the cottage door, frozen, staring at the photograph pinned to the wood. The wind pushed gently at my coat, snowflakes settling in my hair, but I didn't feel any of it. All I could see was the image in front of me, a figure standing at the cliff's edge. Waves crashing below. Gray sky stretching endlessly above. And the figure wore my coat. The same tan winter coat with the slightly frayed collar. The same one I was wearing right now. But I had never gone to the cliffs. I had arrived yesterday, and I had barely walked farther than the shop. So who was in that photograph? And more importantly, who took it? My fingers trembled as I reached up and pulled the photo from the door. The thumbtack made a small sharp sound as it loosened from the wood. I stared at the picture closely. The woman in it had her back to the camera. Her posture looked tense. Shoulders slightly hunched. Head tilted down, as if thinking. As if hurting. Something inside me ached. It felt like looking at a version of myself I hadn't met yet, or one I had been avoiding for a long time. At the bottom of the photo, the handwriting was unmistakable, face it before it breaks. The same careful strokes. The same ink. The same unsettling certainty. I swallowed hard and opened the door, stepping inside quickly. I locked the door behind me. Then locked the second latch. Then the third. The cottage felt different again, not warm or cozy, but claustrophobic, like the walls had shifted closer. I put the photo on the table beside the two letters. All three pieces felt like clues I never asked for. Warnings. Or instructions. I wasn't sure which. I sat down. My hands were still shaking. My heartbeat wouldn't slow. What does this mean? I whispered to myself. My voice sounded strange in the quiet room. I picked up the photograph again and studied it. The cliffs were unmistakable. Miss Gallagher had mentioned them yesterday, saying many visitors liked to walk there during sunrise. She said they were beautiful, but dangerous if someone wasn't careful. I had planned to visit on my last day. Not like this. Not with a threat hanging over me. But was it a threat? Or was it something else? A message. A push. A mirror. Could someone have mistakenly photographed another woman wearing a similar coat? No. No, I knew better. This was deliberate. Personal. Someone wasn't trying to scare me away. They were trying to make me face something. Something about him. The memory hit me sharply, the last fight we had. The slammed doors. The words we threw in frustration and fear. The final moment when I walked out, leaving everything unresolved. I had told myself I left because I needed space. Because I needed quiet. But maybe I left because I was afraid. Afraid of admitting things I buried. Afraid of confronting the truth I kept pushing down. And someone here, someone in this quiet part of Connemara, knew that. But how? That question haunted me more than the letters. The rest of the day felt heavy, slow, restless. I couldn't focus on anything. I barely ate. Every window felt like a place where eyes could be watching. Every creak of the floorboard felt intentional. I kept thinking of Miss Gallagher. Should I show her the photograph? Should I ask her what cliffs these were? Should I ask if she recognized the handwriting? But something stopped me. A strange instinct. Something inside me said the next step wasn't outside the cottage. It was inside myself. I stared at the photograph again. The phrase. Face it before it breaks. What would break? Me? The truth? The past I tried to bury? Or something, someone, back home? My chest tightened painfully at the thought. I reached for my phone. I hadn't checked it since arriving. I hadn't wanted to. It felt too tied to the world I left behind. But maybe I needed to check it now. When I turned it on, the screen lit up brighter than I expected. Notifications flooded in, old messages from friends, work emails, meaningless updates. And then I saw it. A long list of missed calls. All from one number. His number. My breath caught. He had tried calling last night. 3 times. Earlier today. 2 more. The last missed call was only an hour ago. My hands trembled. I didn't answer. I didn't call back. I put the phone face down on the table. My throat tightened. My eyes burned again. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not while everything here felt so fragile. But ignoring him suddenly felt dangerous, not because of him, but because of the letters. Because of what they meant. Because someone here believed I needed to face him. Something deep in my chest whispered, what if the letters don't stop until you do? Night came too quickly. The sky turned almost black by 5. Snow thickened. Wind howled softly against the windows. I left the cottage lights on. All of them. I didn't want any dark corners. The fire burned steadily, but its warmth didn't settle inside me like it had before. I kept the letters and the photograph on the table. I kept glancing at them, as if expecting them to change on their own. Every minute felt slow. Like the air itself was waiting. Around 8, I made soup I barely tasted. Around 9, I tried reading but couldn't get past a page. Around 10, I sat on the couch and wrapped myself in the blanket like a shield. The cottage was silent. Too silent. Every time I thought of stepping outside, something inside me resisted. Not fear. Not exactly. More like a feeling that once I opened that door, something would shift. Something would begin. I stayed inside. But around midnight, I heard something that made my whole body tense. Not footsteps. Not a knock. A sound of paper sliding again. But not at the door. At the window. Slow, deliberate, a soft scrape. My breath caught. I didn't move at first. I just listened. The sound came again, a faint drag, like someone was pushing something under the frame. I stood slowly, heart pounding, and walked to the window nearest the kitchen. The lantern light from outside flickered faintly against the curtains. I reached out, took a slow breath, and pulled the curtain aside. There, wedged between the sill and the inner frame, was another envelope. I opened the window just enough to pull it in, my hands trembling harder than before. This envelope felt slightly thicker. I walked back to the table, sat down, and opened it carefully. Inside was a folded paper. A small key. Cold metal. Old. Worn. With a faded red string tied around it. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I unfolded the paper. This time, there wasn't just one sentence. There were two. The truth is closer than you think. Tomorrow, go to the cliffs. My breath stopped. The cliffs. The same cliffs from the photograph. The same cliffs where the figure in my coat stood. My hands shook so hard I had to set the paper down. The wind outside picked up. A deep sound, almost like a warning. I stared at the key. What did it open? Why was it left for me? And why did I feel, deep in my gut, that tomorrow, everything would change? Whether I wanted it to or not. I couldn't sleep that night. Not even a little. The key, the letters, the photograph, all of it burned in my mind. I kept turning it over in my hands. Cold, heavy, strange. A symbol I didn't understand. Miss Gallagher's words echoed in my head, face it before it breaks. The truth comes quietly before it comes loud. I tried to imagine what could be waiting at the cliffs. A revelation? A confrontation? Or something darker? Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure from the photograph. Standing at the cliff's edge, hair blown by the wind, coat tight around her shoulders. And me. I knew it was me. Finally, I gave up trying to sleep. I sat near the fire, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the letters and key on the table. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it's just a local tradition. Maybe someone is testing me. Maybe it's nothing. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The precision, the timing, the way everything had been placed. This wasn't random. I made myself a cup of tea. I sipped it slowly, hoping the warmth would settle the tightness in my chest. It didn't. It never did. By morning, I felt both anxious and determined. Determined, because I knew I couldn't avoid this. Anxious, because I had no idea what awaited me at the cliffs. I dressed in warm layers, wrapped the scarf tightly around my neck, and tucked the letters and key into my coat pocket. The wind had dropped a little, leaving the snow soft and fresh on the ground. I walked out of the cottage, locking the door behind me. The cliffs weren't far. Maybe 20 minutes walk along a narrow trail. The path was icy in places, but I took my time. Every step felt deliberate, like I was moving towards something I had been running from for far too long. As I reached the cliff's edge, I stopped. The view was breathtaking. Waves crashed against jagged rocks below, white spray rising with each hit. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds, and the wind blew strong, whipping my hair around my face. And then I noticed it. A small stone circle near the cliff's edge. The kind of circle people make to mark something important. A place to remember, a place to honor, a place to reveal. I stepped closer. My heart raced. The key in my pocket felt heavier than ever. On one of the larger stones was a small, weathered box. Wooden. Locked. The red string tied around it faded, but familiar. I froze. The key in my pocket pulsed in my hand. This was it. This was what I was meant to face. I knelt slowly and pulled the key from my coat pocket. Hands shaking, I fitted into the lock. It clicked easily. The box opened. Inside was a bundle of letters. Handwritten. Faded, yellowed at the edges. Tied together with the same red string. I lifted the first letter. The handwriting was mine. My handwriting. Confused, I read the words aloud softly. I am running from the past. I need to face it, but I am scared. I opened another. Every time I think I can escape, I am reminded that truth waits for me. I hope one day I am brave enough. And another. The person I left behind is hurt. I can feel it. I cannot bear to face them, but I know I must. I sat back on my heels. This wasn't someone else. It was me. From months ago. Letters I had written to myself. Drafts I never sent. Thoughts I never admitted out loud. I ran my fingers over the papers, a wave of understanding washing over me. The letters weren't meant to harm me. They were reminders. Pieces of myself that I had ignored. The same messages were delivered to me now, because someone, or something, wanted me to reconcile with my own truth. I looked at the cliff. The wind whipped stronger, lifting my hair and coat around me. And then I noticed the faint path down the rocks. Someone had been here recently. Miss Gallagher's words returned to me. The truth comes quietly before it comes loud. I realized now that the loud part wasn't the letters. It wasn't the footsteps. It wasn't even the photograph. It was me, finally facing what I had buried. I knelt there for a long time, holding the letters, feeling the cold wind cut through me, feeling the ache in my chest. And then I heard a voice. Soft. Familiar. A voice I hadn't expected. I knew you'd come here. I froze. Heart thundering. Eyes scanning the rocks. And there he was. Standing a few feet away. The same man I had walked away from months ago. The one I had avoided, ignored, tried to run from. But he had come. He had waited. Or perhaps, like me, he had been pulled here by the same force that had led me to the cliffs. We stared at each other. No words. Just the wind and the waves. Finally, he spoke again. I didn't know you'd leave like that, he said softly. Or that you'd come here, to Connemara, without telling me. I swallowed. I didn't know how to face it, I admitted. The guilt, the arguments. I thought leaving would help. He stepped closer. The wind pushed against him, carrying the faint scent of pine and snow. I was hurt, he said. Angry. Confused. But I waited. I hoped you'd come back. Or at least face me someday. I looked down at the letters in my hands. Maybe this, all of this, the letters, the photograph, the key, was meant to make me face it. He nodded slowly. I think so, he said. Maybe this place, maybe Connemara, wanted us to speak the truth. I felt tears prick my eyes. Not just for the pain, but for the relief. The release. The moment when hiding and running no longer mattered. We sat on the edge of the cliff, the letters between us, the wind cold against our skin, and we began to talk. Honestly. Slowly. Carefully. No shouting. No anger. No pretending. Just two people facing the past they had buried. Two hearts willing to confront what they had avoided for far too long. Hours passed. The snow fell softly around us. The waves crashed below. And I realized something powerful: peace isn't something you find by running away. It's something you create when you face the truth. When you admit what you've done. When you forgive yourself and others. The letters, the key, the photograph, they were never meant to scare me. They were a guide. A push. A bridge between the person I was running from and the person I could be. And in that moment, standing on the cliffs of Connemara, I finally understood the meaning of Miss Gallagher's words: face it before it breaks. Because sometimes, the hardest truth is also the one that sets you free. The wind whipped stronger as we stayed on the cliffs, sitting on the edge, watching the waves crash below. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The cold air filled the space between us, carrying both tension and a strange kind of calm. I clutched the letters in my hands. They felt heavier now, full of the emotions I had tried to bury: regret, guilt, longing, and fear. Each letter was a small confession, a piece of my heart I hadn't dared to show anyone. Until now. He finally broke the silence. You left because it hurt, he said softly. Not because you didn't care. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say it wasn't just that. But deep down, I knew he was right. I had walked away because it was easier to escape than to face the heartbreak. But escaping didn't erase the pain. It only carried it forward, like a shadow following me wherever I went. I thought leaving would fix things, I admitted quietly. It didn't. It only made everything heavier. He nodded slowly, his eyes serious. I felt it too, he said. Every day I hoped you'd come back. I wanted to hear the truth. I wanted closure. Closure. That word cut deep. I had been avoiding it for months, pretending it didn't matter. But here, on these cliffs, with the cold wind on my face and the letters between us, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I unfolded the first letter again. Read it aloud slowly, letting each word sink into the air around us. I am running from the past. I need to face it, but I am scared. He listened silently. No interruptions. No judgment. Just presence. And that alone was more comforting than I expected. I continued, voice trembling. Every time I think I can escape, I am reminded that truth waits for me. I hope one day I am brave enough. Tears stung my eyes. I folded the letter, placed it gently on the stone beside me. And finally, I looked at him. I'm ready to tell you everything, I whispered. He reached out, taking my hand in his. Warm, firm, reassuring. I'm ready to listen, he said simply. Whatever it is, we face it together. For the next few hours, I told him everything. The fights. The misunderstandings. The nights I spent alone, crying silently. The guilt I carried, believing I had failed him, failed us, failed myself. I spoke in short sentences, trying to keep my voice steady, but it kept breaking. He didn't interrupt. He didn't react with anger or frustration. He only held my hand, occasionally nodding, sometimes squeezing gently. And when I finished, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy. Full of reflection. Full of understanding. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't realize how much you were holding inside," he said softly. "And I didn't realize how much I held too." I nodded. "I didn't want to hurt you," I whispered. "I just didn't know how to fix things." He shook his head gently. "You didn't hurt me more than we hurt each other by staying silent. But now we can try to make sense of it." We sat together, the letters between us, the wind biting at our cheeks, and slowly, a sense of relief began to settle in. The truth was out. Raw, messy, emotional, but out. And in that moment, I understood the real meaning behind the letters, the photograph, and the key. They weren't punishment. They weren't a threat. They were a bridge to honesty. A guide to finally facing what I had run from for so long. After a long pause, he asked softly, "Do you forgive yourself?" I didn't answer immediately. Forgiveness had always been the hardest part. I had blamed myself for leaving. For hurting him. For avoiding my own feelings. But now, sitting here, surrounded by the vast, unforgiving beauty of the cliffs, I could feel it. A small shift. A crack in the wall I had built around my heart. "I think I can," I whispered finally. He smiled softly. "Good. That's the first step." And then he said something that surprised me. "I never stopped caring. Even when you left, even when it was hard to understand. I hoped you'd find your way back. Not to me necessarily, but to yourself." I nodded, feeling tears slip down my cheeks. "I think I found my way," I said softly. The sun, hidden behind gray clouds all morning, began to peek through in soft streaks. The cliffs looked even more beautiful now. The waves shimmered in pale silver. And I realized something profound. The landscape, the cold, the wind, everything had guided me here. To this confrontation. To this reckoning. To this clarity. We stayed on the cliffs until evening. Talking, sharing memories, admitting truths, letting the weight of months lift bit by bit. Every confession, every tear, every soft word of understanding felt like a step toward healing. The letters, the photograph, and the key had led me here, yes. But it was the conversation, the honesty, the courage to finally speak, that was the true turning point. As darkness began to settle, we walked slowly back to my cottage. The snow had softened into a gentle drizzle. Footprints marked our path, temporary evidence of where we had been. When we reached the door, I realized something important. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of him. Not of the letters. Not of facing my past. For the first time in months, I felt a calm certainty. Miss Gallagher's words came to me again, softly, almost like a whisper. The truth comes quietly before it comes loud. And I understood now. The letters, the photograph, the key, they were the quiet. Our conversation, our honesty, that was the loud. Inside the cottage, we made tea. We didn't need words to fill the silence anymore. It was a comfortable silence. A shared understanding. I looked at the letters and photograph on the table. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the push. For the reminders. For the courage to face the truth I had hidden from myself. And as the night settled, I realized something profound. Peace doesn't come from running. Peace comes from confronting. From honesty. From forgiving yourself. From admitting what you've avoided. And from letting someone else hear the truth, and still choose to stay. I placed the key beside the letters. It no longer felt heavy. It felt symbolic. A key not to a door, but to my own heart. To my courage. To the part of me that had been hidden, scared, and unresolved. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. Deep, quiet sleep. No fear. No shadows. Just calm, and a sense of clarity I had never expected to find in Connemara. Because sometimes, the hardest winter, the coldest snow, the sharpest winds, bring the warmest truths. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for whatever came next. The next morning, the air in the cottage felt different. Soft sunlight spilled across the wooden floor. The snow outside reflected a gentle glow, and the wind no longer felt threatening. It was calm. Peaceful. I woke up slowly, still feeling the warmth of sleep, but also the strange weightlessness that comes after facing a truth you've been avoiding for too long. I reached over to the table where the letters and the key still lay. I picked up the first letter, running my fingers over the faded handwriting. For the first time, the words didn't hurt. They didn't remind me of fear or guilt. Instead, they felt like a record of survival. A reminder that I had made it through the hardest part, admitting the truth. I looked at him as he sat quietly across from me. He had made tea, the steam rising softly from the cups. The morning light caught his eyes, softening the lines that had hardened in the months we had been apart. We didn't speak at first, just sat together, sipping the tea, letting the quiet fill the room. Finally, I broke the silence. I think. I understand now, I said softly. The letters, the photograph, the key, they weren't meant to scare me. They were meant to guide me. He nodded slowly. Exactly, he said. Someone, or something, wanted you to face what you had been avoiding. And you did. That's what matters. I smiled faintly, feeling a release I hadn't known I needed. For months, I had carried an invisible weight. It had pressed down on my chest, filled my thoughts, and shadowed every decision. But now, sitting here, the weight felt lighter. I could breathe. We spent the morning talking again, but differently this time. No anger. No defensiveness. Just honesty. We shared memories, both painful and happy, and admitted how much we had missed each other during our time apart. It was strange to think that months of silence, misunderstandings, and distance could vanish so quickly with just the right conversation. After a while, he stood and walked over to the window, looking outside. The snow will melt soon, he said quietly. Then everything will look new again. I followed his gaze. The world outside was still white, but I could imagine the thaw. The roads, the trees, the cliffs, all renewed. It felt symbolic. Like the beginning of something new. I turned to him. I think. I'm ready to go home, I said softly. Not running. Not avoiding. But, facing the future. He smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. I'd like that, he said. And we'll face it together. Before leaving the cottage, I visited Miss Gallagher one last time. I wanted to thank her. To let her know that the letters, the key, and everything she had warned me about had worked. Her cottage was quiet, warm, and smelled of lavender and old books. She smiled when she saw me. You look different, she said softly. Calmer. Lighter. I nodded. I am, I said. Thank you. For everything. For warning me, guiding me, for believing I could face it. She shook her head gently. I didn't do anything, she said. You did it all yourself. The letters, the photograph, the key, they were reminders. But the courage came from you. You faced what you were running from. Her words touched me deeply. I felt a lump in my throat. Do the letters stop now? I asked. She smiled faintly. They stop when the truth is acknowledged. And you acknowledged it. You faced it. So yes, they will stop. I felt a strange sense of relief. The fear that had gripped me since arriving in Connemara finally began to lift. The weight of secrecy, guilt, and avoidance was gone. Before leaving, she reached out and touched my hand. "Remember this, dear," she said softly. "Peace isn't found by running. It's found by facing. By speaking. By forgiving." I nodded. "I understand now," I whispered. And for the first time since arriving in Connemara, I truly believed it. We walked back to my cottage, gathering our things. The snow had softened into a gentle drizzle, and the path was slippery in places. But it didn't matter. Every step felt lighter than the one before. I felt free. I carried the letters and the key carefully. They were no longer burdens. They were keepsakes. Symbols of courage, honesty, and the moment I stopped running from my past. As we stepped outside, I looked at the cliffs one last time. The waves crashed with the same power, relentless yet beautiful. And I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the place that had forced me to face myself. Gratitude for the lessons hidden in fear and uncertainty. Gratitude for the chance to heal. The drive back from Connemara was quiet but comforting. We didn't need constant conversation. The silence was shared. We occasionally looked at each other, smiling softly, knowing we had both faced our truths. We had both been changed. And now, the future felt open and possible. When we returned home, I carefully placed the letters and key in a small wooden box. It was a keepsake, a reminder of what I had learned. A reminder that running doesn't solve anything. Facing the truth, even when it's painful, is the only way to find peace. I thought about the months I had spent avoiding, hiding, and carrying guilt. I thought about how fear had made me believe that distance and silence were the answer. Now I knew they were never the answer. And most importantly, I knew that I could face the future. With honesty. With courage. With forgiveness. That Christmas, I didn't just find peace. I found understanding. I found closure. I found the courage to rebuild what had been broken, not only in my relationships but in myself. The letters, the photograph, and the key had guided me. They had pushed me to confront the truth I was avoiding. And by facing it, I discovered that sometimes the hardest truths bring the greatest freedom. That Christmas in Connemara was quiet. But it was filled with a warmth I hadn't expected. Not from the fire or the cozy cottages. Not from the snow or the soft lights. But from the truth, finally acknowledged, finally embraced, and finally released. And I knew I would never run from my past again. The days following that Christmas in Connemara were different. The snow slowly melted, leaving behind damp earth and the first green shoots of early spring. It was quiet, peaceful. The kind of calm that doesn't announce itself with loud fanfare, but instead seeps gently into your bones. I woke each morning with a sense of ease I hadn't felt in months. The letters, the photograph, and the key were safely tucked away in the small wooden box I kept on my shelf. They no longer carried fear or anxiety. They were symbols of growth, of courage, of the truth I had finally faced. He stayed with me those days. Not because he had to, but because we both wanted to share the calm we had earned. We walked together along the paths near the cottages. We talked about small things, the way the sun felt warm on our faces, the sound of birds returning after the long winter, the smell of wet earth and pine. And we talked about big things too, dreams, hopes, and the future we wanted to build, together. Every conversation reminded me of how fragile and strong life could be at the same time. Fragile, because it could break with one wrong step, one harsh word, one lie left unspoken. Strong, because honesty, courage, and love could heal even the deepest wounds. One afternoon, we walked back to the cliffs. Not because we were searching for the past, but because we wanted to remember it. We wanted to acknowledge the place that had forced us to confront our fears. The cliffs looked different now. The snow was gone. The rocks glistened with wetness. The waves below were calmer than during the winter storms, gentle yet steady. And standing there together, I realized how far we had come. I picked up a small stone from the edge of the path. I held it in my hand for a moment, thinking about everything we had experienced. The letters, the key, the photograph, the fear, the guilt, the confrontation. It had all led to this moment, a moment of clarity, of peace, of understanding. I turned to him. "We've changed," I said softly. "We're not the same people who arrived here a few weeks ago." He nodded. "Yes," he said. "And we never will be. That's okay. Change isn't something to fear. It's something to embrace." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. It wasn't just the sun on my skin, or the gentle breeze, or even the sense of freedom from my past. It was the realization that I had faced myself fully, and in doing so, I had discovered a strength I didn't know existed. We stood there for a long while, watching the waves. No words were necessary. The silence spoke for both of us. A silence of understanding, of mutual respect, and of love that had been tested by distance and fear but had survived anyway. The next day, I returned to Miss Gallagher's cottage one last time. I wanted to share with her the clarity I had found. I wanted her to know that the letters, the key, and everything she had prepared for me had worked. She was tending to her small garden when I arrived, the faint smell of lavender and soil in the air. She looked up and smiled. "You look peaceful," she said softly. "Yes," I replied. "I am. More than I've been in months. Thank you for guiding me, even in ways I didn't fully understand at first." She nodded, her expression gentle. The letters, the photograph, the key, they were tools. But the courage, the honesty, the willingness to face the truth, that came from you. I felt a lump in my throat. Her words were kind, but more importantly, they reminded me that I had finally done what I thought I couldn't. We talked for a while, sharing memories of the winter storms, the soft snowfall, and the nights when the letters arrived. We laughed quietly at the tension we both remembered, the worry, the fear that had once filled the quiet cottages. It felt like a release, not just for me, but for her too. Before leaving, she reached out and touched my arm. "Remember this," she said softly. "Life will test you. It will challenge you. But the only way to find peace is to face the truth, no matter how frightening it may be." I nodded. "I understand now," I whispered. "And I'll carry it with me." Back at my cottage, life returned to a gentle rhythm. The mornings were filled with the soft light of dawn. The afternoons brought walks along the forest paths, the sound of birds returning to the trees. And the evenings were spent by the fire, talking, reading, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. The letters, the key, and the photograph remained in the wooden box, a reminder of the journey I had completed. They no longer caused anxiety. Instead, they represented courage, honesty, and the transformative power of facing the past. One evening, as we sat together sipping tea, he turned to me. "You know," he said softly, "we were given a gift, in a way. The letters, the photograph, they forced us to see ourselves clearly. To confront what we needed to. And now, here we are. Stronger. Closer. Honest." I nodded, feeling tears prick my eyes. "Yes," I said quietly. "We were given a chance to heal. And we did." He smiled, and for the first time in months, I felt completely at ease. The fear, the guilt, the uncertainty, all of it had faded. replaced by understanding, by forgiveness, and by love that was honest and real. As the weeks passed, I continued to reflect on my journey. The letters, the key, and the photograph had been extraordinary tools, yes. But they were only symbols. The real change had come from within me, the courage to speak, the willingness to admit the truth, and the strength to forgive both myself and others. I realized that many people spend their lives running from the past, from mistakes, from pain. They avoid confrontation, hide from honesty, and let fear control their decisions. But true peace comes only when you face the truth fully. Only when you admit your mistakes, accept your guilt, and allow yourself to heal. I had learned this lesson in the most unexpected way, in a small cottage in Connemara, guided by letters, a key, and a photograph that reminded me of the person I had been and the person I wanted to become. And as the last of the snow melted, leaving green hills and gentle streams, I felt a quiet sense of triumph. Not a loud victory, not a dramatic change. But a subtle, enduring peace that filled every corner of my heart. I knew that life would continue to bring challenges. There would be mistakes, regrets, and moments of fear. But now I understood something vital: no challenge, no mistake, no fear is greater than the courage to face it. That Christmas, and the days that followed, became a turning point. A time of honesty. A time of healing. A time of finding the strength to move forward, not by running from the past, but by embracing it fully, learning from it, and letting it shape a better future. And so, in the quiet village of Connemara, surrounded by snow, cliffs, and the soft warmth of understanding, I discovered a truth I would carry forever: peace doesn't come to those who hide. It comes to those who face what they fear, embrace what they have avoided, and forgive what they cannot change. And in that realization, I finally felt free. The following morning, the sun rose gently over Connemara, painting the cliffs and cottages in soft gold. It was quiet. Peaceful. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand attention, but quietly seeps into your bones. I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. I looked around the small cottage. The letters, the photograph, and the key remained on the table. But they no longer carried fear, uncertainty, or weight. They had served their purpose. They had guided me through the storm of my past and helped me face the truth I had been avoiding. I stretched, feeling the stiffness of travel and tension leaving my body. Beside me, he stirred, opening his eyes and smiling softly. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning," I replied, smiling back. The smile was genuine. Real. Not forced. Not tinged with worry or guilt. For a long while, we sat together, drinking tea, listening to the soft morning sounds of the village. The distant clang of a bell, the faint chatter of early risers, the gentle rustle of wind through the trees. It all felt comforting, grounding. The world hadn't changed drastically overnight, but everything inside me had shifted. I was no longer burdened by fear, guilt, or avoidance. That morning, I decided to take one last walk to the cliffs. Not to confront the past. Not to search for answers. But simply to appreciate what had happened, to honor the journey that had brought me here. The path was clear now, no longer icy, with patches of early spring grass peeking through the earth. Every step I took felt purposeful, deliberate. Each footfall was a reminder of the courage it had taken to face the truth, and the peace that followed. When I reached the cliff edge, I paused. The waves crashed gently below, the sun glinting off the water. It was breathtaking, beautiful, and serene. And standing there, I realized how much I had grown. The cliffs, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now felt like a sanctuary. A reminder that even the most overwhelming obstacles could be faced. That the most painful truths could be confronted. And that through courage, honesty, and forgiveness, healing was possible. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs. The letters, the key, and the photograph had led me here, yes. But it was the choices I had made, the courage to speak, to listen, to forgive, that had truly changed everything. He joined me at the cliff's edge, standing silently beside me. We didn't speak immediately. Words felt unnecessary. The quiet itself was comforting, a testament to how far we had come. After months of silence, misunderstandings, and fear, we had finally arrived at a place of mutual understanding and peace. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft and steady. "We've been given a second chance," he said. "Not just with each other, but with ourselves." I nodded, feeling tears prick my eyes. "Yes," I said. "We were running, avoiding, hiding. But now, we can move forward. Honestly, openly, without fear." He reached for my hand. Warm. Firm. Reassuring. And in that simple touch, I felt a sense of security, of belonging, of love, a love strengthened, not weakened, by trials and truth. We stood there for a long time, watching the waves, feeling the wind, letting the peace settle in. The letters, the photograph, the key, they were no longer guides. They were reminders. Of courage. Of honesty. Of the power of facing one's fears. Returning to the cottage, we began to pack our things. The snow had completely melted, leaving behind soft paths and glistening stones. The village had slowly come back to life with the early spring bloom. Everything seemed renewed, fresh, hopeful. I carefully placed the letters, the photograph, and the key back into the wooden box. It was a keepsake now, a reminder of what I had endured and what I had overcome. I would keep it with me, not as a burden, but as a symbol of strength and courage. As we prepared to leave, I looked back at the cottage, the little haven that had held me during my journey of self-discovery. I whispered softly, "Thank you." Not to anyone specific. Not even to Miss Gallagher. Just a quiet acknowledgement to the universe, to the lessons learned, to the courage I had found. The drive away from Connemara was calm. We didn't speak much. Words weren't needed. The scenery passed by in soft blur, rolling hills, streams reflecting sunlight, trees waking from winter slumber. Every mile felt like a step further from fear, and closer to a life of honesty, understanding, and peace. I thought about the months I had spent running from my past. Running from mistakes, from pain, from uncertainty. I realized how futile it had been. Running doesn't erase the past. It only prolongs the struggle. But facing the truth, acknowledging guilt, speaking honestly, and forgiving, that was transformative. That was liberation. And I had done it. When we arrived back home, the world felt familiar yet new. I looked around my own home with fresh eyes. The spaces I had once occupied with fear and hesitation now felt open, light, and welcoming. Even the smallest things, the sunlight streaming through the windows, the scent of coffee, the quiet hum of life, felt different. Richer. Fuller. We spent that evening unpacking, sharing stories, and laughing quietly. Not a forced laughter, but the kind that comes from comfort, understanding, and shared experience. It was ordinary, yet extraordinary. At one point, he turned to me and said softly, "Do you realize what you've accomplished?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You faced the past," he said. "You didn't run. You confronted your fears. You spoke the truth. And you forgave. That's not easy. Most people never do it." I smiled faintly, feeling tears rise. "I know," I whispered. "But it was necessary. And I'm grateful. Grateful for everything that led me here." He nodded. "And now?" he asked gently. "Now we begin again." I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs with hope and clarity. "Yes," I said softly. Now we begin again. Stronger, wiser, honest, and free. That night, I placed the letters, the photograph, and the key on the shelf beside my bed. I didn't need to hide them. I didn't need to fear them. They were part of my story. Part of my journey. Part of the proof that courage, honesty, and forgiveness could change everything. I lay down in bed, feeling warmth spread through my chest. The past no longer haunted me. The mistakes no longer weighed me down. And the fear no longer controlled me. Instead, I felt peace. Deep, steady, unshakable peace. I drifted off to sleep that night knowing that life would bring challenges. It always does. But now I had learned the most important lesson: peace comes not from running. Not from hiding. Not from avoiding what frightens you. Peace comes from facing the truth, embracing it fully, and allowing yourself to heal. And with that knowledge, I knew I was ready. Ready for life. Ready for love. Ready for whatever came next. A new beginning. A fresh chapter. A heart healed by honesty, courage, and forgiveness. And in that moment, I knew I was finally free.